They say some people walk into your life and turn everything upside down. I never believed that. I was too grounded, too measured, too damaged to fall for romantic notions. Love to me had always been like a sunset behind a locked window. Beautiful, but distant. I lived quietly, methodically, and without surprise. That is, until I met her. Her name was Lila. It was a Thursday morning, and I was running late to my favorite cafe. My routine was sacred. Same corner seat, same black. Coffee, same solitude. But that day, my corner was taken. She sat there like she belonged to the moment, like time would bend for her if she asked it nicely. Dark red scarf, oversized sweater, a paperback half open in her hand, and eyes that didn't just look at you, but saw through you. I sat at the table next to hers, annoyed at first. That corner was mine. It had been mine for months, maybe even years. But then she smiled just a little. The kind of smile that doesn't ask for attention, but pulls it in anyway. And just like that, the rest of the world felt irrelevant. "Sorry," she said, glancing over. "I can move if this is your usual spot." Her voice wasn't sweet. Wasn't soft. It was honest, unapologetically real. I shook my head. "It's fine," I said, trying not to stare too long. "I guess some things are meant to change." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze curious. Then she offered her name without asking for mine. Lila, a name that would echo in my mind more times than I could count. We didn't speak much that first day, but something was already happening, something beyond explanation. I found myself going back to the cafe the next day, and the day after that, so did she. Always the same table, always that same half smile. It wasn't long before we started talking about books, about cities we had never been to, about regrets we couldn't shake off. With Lila, the silence between words was as meaningful as the words themselves. She didn't fill space to avoid discomfort. She let it breathe. And in that quiet, I started hearing parts of myself I had forgotten existed. One evening, as the sky outside the cafe darkened to navy, she looked at me and asked, "What's the one thing you've never told anyone?" I paused. No one had ever asked me something like that. And more importantly, no one had made me want to answer. "I'm afraid I've forgotten how to love," I said, almost ashamed. She didn't flinch. Didn't tee off for a cliche, just reached across the table and touched my hand gently. "Then let me remind you," she whispered. "It wasn't a promise. I was a challenge, and I accepted." Asterisk. Started meeting outside the cafe after that. Parks, sidewalks, bookstores, old record shops. Places where life moved just a little slower, just enough, for two people to truly see each other. I never tried to impress her, and she never asked me to. There was no grand performance between us, no elaborate lies or glittering facades, just two people, one quietly broken, the other beautifully bruised, trying to find something real. In a world that rarely offered it, she had a way of bringing warmth into cold places. Lila didn't fix things. She didn't try to. She just sat with you in your mess until you could breathe again. I told her things I hadn't even told myself, about my father's silence, my mother's absence, the war one carried in my chest, the relationships I ruined before they had a chance to become something, and how I stopped believing anyone would ever stay. She never judged. She never interrupted. Sometimes, all she did was reach for my hand and hold it. And in those small, wordless moments, I felt more seen than in all the years I spent trying to be understood. I remember the first time she cried in front of me. It was after a long walk, the city lights dancing on the wet pavement. She had been quiet more than usual. We sat on a bench near the river, and I asked her what was wrong. She didn't answer right away. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Do you ever feel like you're just someone's afterthought?" The question hit me like a punch. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. She continued, her voice shaking. "I gave someone everything I had once, years of my life. And in the end, I was just a chapter he skimmed through on his way to someone else. Didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing that felt right. I wrapped my arms around her and held her close, tighter than I had ever held anyone. "You're not an afterthought, Lila," I whispered. "You're the page that makes the whole book worth reading." That night we didn't kiss. We didn't even speak after that. We just sat there in the quiet, listening to the sound of the water and the beating of two hearts that had spent too long being alone. A week later, she invited me to her apartment. It was small, cluttered with books and dried flowers, lit by warm yellow lamps and the scent of cinnamon tea. She showed me her paintings, messy, abstract, emotional, each one a story she hadn't found the words to tell. I asked her what they meant. She shrugged. "They're not meant to mean anything, just to feel something." Never tried to make sense of things. She just lived them that night. I kissed her slowly, carefully, like I was afraid she might vanish. She didn't vanish. She leaned in, pulled me closer, and in that kiss, I felt something shatter inside me. But it wasn't pain. It was the breaking of a wall I had spent years building. I let her in, fully, without resistance. From that night on, we were no longer too separate. People walking beside each other. We were us. But love, I learned, doesn't always unfold like a poem. Sometimes it arrives like a storm, beautiful. Yes, but also wild and unpredictable. Asterisk, I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke up to the sound of her voice again. She was in the kitchen, humming a song I used to hear on the radio, one of those soft rock love ballads from the 90s. I lay there for a moment, listening, wondering if it was all a dream. But the scent of her perfume lingered in the air, mixed with the smell of fresh coffee. I got up and found her barefoot, wearing one of my old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled up, her hair messy in the most perfect way. She turned, smiled, and handed me a cup without saying a word. "Good morning," I said, my voice still gravelly from sleep. She just nodded, her eyes scanning my face like she was trying to memorize it. We didn't talk much that morning. We just sat at the table, drank coffee, and let the silence do the heavy lifting. It was like that for days. She never asked to define what we were, never questioned the past. She was just there loving me without demanding anything in return. And somehow, that made me want to give her everything. We started spending every evening on the rooftop. I showed her the constellations I learned in basic training, told her stories about deserts and mountains and the men I lost. She didn't flinch. She just listened, holding my hand tightly when the silence stretched too long. Then one night, as a storm rolled in and lightning painted the sky in violent flashes, she turned to me and said, "I don't want to be a memory." That hit me harder than any explosion I'd faced overseas. "I want to stay," she added, "but I need to know you'll let me in. Not just into your bed, but into the parts you've locked away." I didn't answer her that night. I couldn't. But the next morning, before she even opened her eyes, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You already are." That was the start of something real, something unshakable. I stopped running. I stopped pretending. I stopped punishing myself for surviving, and in the quiet of our small apartment, with records playing softly in the background and her arms wrapped around me like armor, I realized this was the first war I didn't have to fight alone. Asterisk that. Morning, the light in our apartment looked different. It wasn't just the way the sun filtered through the curtains or the quiet buzz of the city waking up outside. It was her. The way she moved in the space, like she belonged there, like we belonged together. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something to go wrong. I didn't feel like I had to keep one foot out the door. I was all in. We spent that weekend without checking our phones, without making plans. We danced in the kitchen to old soul records, slow and close, her cheek against my chest. Both of us swaying like time had slowed down just for us. I watched her laugh until she cried when I burnt the pancakes. I kissed her in the rain when the power went out. The kind of kiss you only see in movies and never believe could be real. But it was real. All of it. She started leaving little things. Around the apartment, her books, her hairpins, her slippers by the bed. At first, I was terrified. Each item felt like a weight on my chest. Not because I didn't want her there, but because I couldn't stand the idea of losing it once I had it. She noticed. Of course she did. One night as we lay in bed, her fingers tracing circles on my chest, She said, "You still think I'll leave, don't you?" I swallowed hard. "I think everything good eventually does." She propped herself up on one elbow and looked at me, really looked at me. "Then let me be the first thing that doesn't." I didn't sleep that night. I watched her breathe, memorized the rhythm of her chest rising and falling, and whispered every fear I'd buried deep inside me into the dark. She never stirred. But in the morning, I found a note on my nightstand. I heard everything. And I'm still here. That broke me, in the best way. I stopped waiting for the exit. I started believing in the staying. Weeks turned into months. We built a rhythm, a life. She painted the walls in soft colors I never would have picked on my own, and I learned too. Cooked just so she could taste something made with love. We fought sometimes. Real fights. Not about nonsense, but about the important things: boundaries, fears, pasts we couldn't erase. But every time she stayed. Every time we came out stronger. Then came the night I found her sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights, quiet in a way that made my chest tighten. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked back at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm terrified," she whispered, "because I've never loved anyone this much. I don't know how to be okay if I lose you." I crossed the room, knelt in front of her, and took her hands in mine. "You won't lose me," I said. "Not unless you run." She leaned in, pressing her forehead to mine. "Then let's promise to never run, no matter how hard it gets." Right there, in the middle of a city that never slowed down, in the arms of a woman who refused to give up on me. I made a promise I never intended to break. I thought I understood love before her. I thought it was about passion and kisses that left you breathless. But she showed me love was in the quiet moments. The way she folded my laundry, the way she stood beside me at my worst. The way she didn't try to fix me, only held the pieces until I could do it myself. She didn't save me. She reminded me I was worth saving, and that was enough. Years from now, if anyone asks me what changed my life, I won't say the war or the scars it left behind. I'll say it was her. A woman with eyes full of fire who walked into my life. Without warning, and stayed long enough to light every dark corner. I never believed in fate. But I believe in her, and I believe in us. Because some loves don't burn out. Some loves burn forever.